Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. We have gathered today and we're lighting candles in memory of a lot of people who perished. But the biggest tragedy for Sikhs is that Sikhs themselves haven't been able to understand their own narrative, their own story, and where 1984 in Delhi takes its place in our history. What's worrying is that when you listen to much of the rhetoric from politicians and in the media, and from our own even Sikh organizations, we still refer to this episode in our history as a riot. Despite the overwhelming evidence that this was a planned genocide of our people, we still refer to this as dange or riots. We can understand the Indian establishment wanting this to be a riot and go down in history as a riot. Because if by some miracle we do prosecute somebody, the sentence they'll get for a riot would be minimal, but the sentence they'd get for a genocide would be huge. So we can understand their perspective when they want this termed as a riot. But why are we looking at this as a riot? We know the same size rod was used on every single male who was bludgeoned to death in Delhi 1984. We know this special white powder that was thrown in the faces of Sikhs, that lit up when it was thrown on them, was passed throughout Delhi. We know kerosene, which is hard to get hold of in Delhi, was passed around because one of the senior congressmen had a kerosene depot. The uniformity in the planning of this genocide is actually quite frightening when you have a look at it. And when I was doing a bit of research, I realized, and I didn't realize this, I realized that they were marking Sikh homes with paint with either an X or an S. We live in a time where we've got YouTube in our hands, we've got Facebook, we've got all this social media, we've got Twitter, Instagram. If we want to organize, look how much planning this took, despite the fact that we've got social media. 30 years ago, they had one TV station, which is Doordarshan TV, and one radio station, which is All India Radio. 30 years ago, they had no social media, but within 24 hours, Delhi had been turned into a death camp. And I talk about this paint that was plastered on Sikh doors and businesses. Because in Delhi, even if you look at the shops, the signs are either in Hindi or in English. How do you recognize, how do you know this belongs to a Sikh man, a Sikh family? These politicians gave out voters lists, school registration forms to find out where the school kids lived, ration cards. And the reason why they marked these doors with an X or an S was because the criminal gangs that they used to kill our people were illiterate. Most of them were ardent rapists and murderers, looters and arsonists who were released from prison on the 1st of November and transported across Delhi. And all they needed to know is if I see an X or an S, that's a Sikh home, because they couldn't read the voters list. Not a single stray dog or a single non-Sikh, not a single stray dog was caught up in that brutality over those 5 days. Not a single stray dog. This is how uniform the whole genocide was, planned to precision. But the reason I say that we can't understand our own narrative is because I've heard Sikh organizations and Sikh individuals say, well, maybe 30 years on we can move on. Maybe we should draw a line under it. Maybe we should have closure. But why can't we have closure? Why is 1984 still relevant to you guys today? And there's a few reasons. The people who perpetrated this genocide, people like Jagdish Tyler, Sajjan Kumar, Darshan Shastri, Arjun Das, Lalit Makhan, HKL Bhagat, Amitabh Bachchan, Rajiv Gandhi, all these individuals and many, many more are occupying high office. People like Jagdish Tyler and Sajjan Kumar, who are normal MPs during Delhi 1984, because they produced a dazzling performance in killing so many Sikh men and raping so many Sikh women, they entered India's cabinet years later. This is how they were rewarded. Narasimha Rao, the Home Minister of Delhi in 1984, told the police to step down as a Home Minister. For the next 4 days, you are going to sit idle. In fact, you're not going to sit idle. What you'll be doing is disarming those Sikhs who are defending their own Gurukars and their own families. We're a martial race. You push us enough and we will defend ourselves, and that's what Sikhs were doing. Although this is a time, incidentally, although this is a time for mourning and tragedy at the sheer loss of human life, there were also instances of bravery, of inspiration, of one Singh standing at Rakabganj Gurdwara with a Siri Sahib and defending it against mobs of 400, 500. Those people, this Narasimha Rao, who I've just mentioned, he was the Home Minister of Delhi and he presided over the whole genocide. What happens to Narasimha Rao 7 years after this genocide? He becomes the Prime Minister of Delhi, of India. The Prime Minister. This is how this man was punished for his role in Delhi 1984. Let's look at some of our victims. So this is the people who perpetrated it. They are occupying high office. They've entered India's cabinet. They have become ministers. One has become a prime minister. And what's happened to our victims? The widows of our history were shoved, like Uncle Ji said, into a widow's colony. They created a place in Delhi where they said, we have taken your husbands and your sons away from you. We have decimated your lives, but we don't even want to have to look at you now. We're going to shove you into little corners called the widow's colony in Tilak Vihar, Tilaknagar and Trilokpuri and many others. The daughters of Guru Gobind Singh are living in squalor, abject poverty, because everything's been taken away from them. Their children are suffering from chronic drug use because they can't get jobs. But this isn't even the real tragedy of Delhi. The real tragedy is that Sheila Dixit said that every person living in the widow's colony now has to pay backdated rent. There are families, as we stand today, who are being evicted from the widow's colony. And people tell us to forget 1984. India doesn't allow us to forget 1984. They are quite happy to want to hang somebody like Davinder Pal Singh Pallur without a shred of evidence. Yeah, Kishori Lal, somebody who admitted that with my own butcher's knife, I chopped Sikhs, he can walk free. They won't allow you to forget. I'll come back to the Sikh narrative. This day and Delhi 1984 isn't one isolated incident. It isn't a sudden outbreak of emotion at the death of Indira Gandhi where Sikhs bore the brunt of it. Sikhs were being massacred before 1984. After Delhi 1984, we had Operation Woodrose. 25,000 young Sikh men were disappeared in forced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and fake encounters. 25,000. Operation Shuddhikaran legalized the rape of Sikh women in Punjab. Operation Black Thunder, Operation Metal, Operation Shanti, the list is endless. All these fancy names, but it all boils down to one thing, our persecution. So what do we do with this persecution? People say to me, Saab, you're always talking about these genocides and all this and all that, but what about the solutions? Deep down, we all know what the solution is. But some of the short-term solutions are that we haven't been able to even recognize this as a genocide. If we can get Delhi 1984 recognized as a genocide, we get into the realms of war crimes. And this is where we want people like Jagdish Tyler, Sajjan Kumar, Amitabh Bachchan, we want them in The Hague and we want them behind bars. We want an independent public inquiry. We live in a democratic country where decades after the Hillsborough disaster, there's still a public inquiry. We even have a public inquiry about phone hacking. But we can't have a public inquiry about the genocide of 250,000 of our people. But these are short-term solutions. Long-term, ask yourself one thing, and ask yourself deep within your heart, what has changed in India to make sure this genocide never happens again? What law has been enacted in India's constitution to safeguard us? When Modi decides that Sikhs need to be taught another lesson, let's give them another bloody punch on the nose. What is safeguarding us? Because ultimately the Indian Union has failed us. From 1947 to the present day. We gave the most amount of lives to liberate India from British imperialism, but that wasn't enough. We then, the very entity that gives you life, water, electricity, grain. We shared that with the rest of the nation. But that wasn't enough. We then went on the borders of Pakistan and China and died in our thousands protecting India. But that wasn't enough. It's time we took a good, long, hard look at ourselves and see, do we want to wait until we're physically annihilated before we want to see a change, before we safeguard ourselves? And how do we safeguard ourselves? Look at present day people like Balwant Singh Rajoana. We all stuck Kesari Nishan Saabs on our arms and our cars and our houses, but what was the man's ultimate message? It wasn't release me. He didn't ask to be released. He said that even though I'm in a small dark cell, in a dingy cell, I've been here for 17 years, I might be here for another 17 years, I might be executed today. But from here, I'm a Khalsa, I'm free. You may be walking free, but from here, you're hopelessly enslaved. Balwant Singh Rajoana, along with all the other warriors like Hawara, are saying to you, don't release me, release yourselves. The Indian Union has failed us, and people look towards us as some kind of psychopaths who want to find a place in the world where we can be independent and free and live in peace and not be persecuted because of our belief system, our lifestyle and our allegiance to our Guru. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.